Okay, so yeah, keep them coming, guys. I'm going to get started. So what do we have here? So this is a question from a few years ago. Why don't you guys let me know what you think the answer is? So the diagram shows the nervous pathway used to coordinate the knee jerk reflex. So when a person is hit at point P, what's going to happen? The lower leg is suddenly raised. So this is a real reflex that you get if you hit a person at this point in their knee. Their leg basically jerks and kicks. So the question's asking to name the neurons A, B, and C. So if you look here, we've got a receptor, which is here, and you can see the message going this way. So that's going to be the electrical impulse going this way. And from there, there's a different neuron that it's switching through, and it's passing through a synapse, which we'll talk about in a second. And then the message is returning back through this neuron to the muscle. So, do you guys know what order everything goes in? So we did a video on this a few days ago, the order of the nervous system. So it all starts off with a stimulus. So a stimulus is a change in the environment, so something that your body can detect. From there, that gets picked up by a receptor. From a receptor, the receptor converts what it picks up into an electrical impulse, and it sends it down a sensory neuron. Then from the sensory neuron, it passes to the CNS. CNS is the spinal cord and the brain. So if it's a voluntary response, it goes directly to the brain. The brain processes the information and it gets sent out. If it's a reflex response, like this question is here, it just goes to another neuron, which we call the relay neuron. So we'll put an R for that. Synapses where chemical diffusers to help. Yep, synapses are to do with neurotransmitter chemicals. There's a question on that later on. So from the relay neuron, what's going to happen? It's going to go to the motor neuron. And then from the motor neuron, it goes to an effector. And that effector gives the response. So name neurons A, B, and C. So from the receptor, we've got the sensory neuron. So the first answer would be sensory neuron. Then second one, B. So that's going to be the one that's coming back here. That's the motor neuron. So they're trying to confuse you here. You might put relay neuron because you might be thinking of the order and think after the sensory neuron there's a relay neuron, but in fact B is the one coming at the end. So that would be the motor neuron. Then for C, that's the middle neuron over there. What we have is the relay neuron. So let me know, guys, if you think you know the answers. If you know any of the answers, then just note them down and I'll let you guys know. And like I said before, any other topics you guys want to go through, then drop in the comments and we'll try and incorporate that into the next few lives. So moving on, next question. The receptor in the muscle in the leg is sensitive to a stimulus. Suggest the stimulus. So this receptor here is basically felt by you hitting the knee. So the question says the person is hit at point P. So if a person's hit at point P, what is that receptor sensing? That's what the question's asking. So what it's sensing is you've got your skin, and when you hit it, there's pressure receptors in your skin. And that's what it senses. So there's loads of different types of receptors you can have. You can have pressure receptors. You can have temperature receptors. Those are also in your skin. You can have light receptors. Light receptors are in the eyes, sound receptors in the ears. And all of those are things that you can basically sense from your surroundings, so your stimulus. So for this one, because your skin is the one that's sensing it, it's going to be a pressure receptor, which is sensing pressure as the stimulus. Right, so let's move on. Describe what happens at the synapse. So someone mentioned the synapse earlier. So what is a synapse? A synapse, if we look at this diagram, let me just rub all of this off. So where we see a synapse, we have a synapse here, we have a synapse here. So what you can see is basically you've got your sensory neuron, your A, going to your relay neuron. That's the bit that's inside the spinal cord. And then that comes out of the motor neuron. So the synapse is the gap between the neurons. So it's asking what happens during these gaps. So there's three things that happen. So this is a 3-mark question. It's 3 things that happen during a synapse. First thing is between these gaps, a chemical is released. Because it's electrical signals which are going through the neurons, when you have a gap, the electrical signals can't flow through the gap. It's like electricity. If you have a broken circuit, you can't have electricity flowing through a broken circuit. So what happens is the electricity goes all the way to the end of the synapse, or the sensory neuron, sorry. And then it releases a chemical. We call that chemical a neurotransmitter chemical. So that's something to mention in this question. That neurotransmitter chemical goes across the gap. It diffuses across the gap. So that's another key term that you should use when answering these. And then it goes to the other end and it basically receives that chemical, and then it converts it into an electrical signal. Remember, through the neurons, you have electrical signals passing through. So this converts to a chemical, which then converts to an electrical signal, and that leads to the message carrying on down the neuron. So how do you get 3 marks from this? So first thing is to mention the neurotransmitter chemical. So first mark, you say a neurotransmitter chemical is released. Then from there, second mark, that diffuses across the gap. So chemical, the neurotransmitter chemical, diffuses across the gap. Then when it reaches the other side, it turns that chemical into an electrical impulse. So it transmits an electrical impulse. So these always come up, these questions about synapses. So I'd say remember these 3 points. If you get any questions on synapses, these are the 3 things that you should be mentioning. So I'm hoping everyone understands this. Please let me know if there's any questions, anything that you want me to recap. I can do that. Okay, so let's move on to the next one. So now, this time, we've got a diagram of a nerve cell, and it's basically going to the brain. There's a connecting neuron in the middle. We've got a junction. We know what that's called now. So remember, that's a synapse. They just haven't mentioned it, so they're probably going to ask about that in the question. And this is just a weird cell. So does anyone know what A and B are? What examples are these for? So this one in particular, this is for AQA, but we'll be, in these sessions, we'll be looking at AQA, OCR and Edexcel. Yeah. Does anyone think they know what A and B could be? So this is just a normal cell. So think about a normal cell, a normal animal cell. You have the nucleus. This is just a specialized animal cell. So it doesn't look like what you learned in the cell topic, but you can think of it as the same. So this is just the edge of a cell. So it would be the outside of an animal cell. Cell wall, not quite, not the cell wall, but you're thinking in the right direction, because cell walls are only in plant cells. This is in an animal cell. So what's on the outside of an animal cell? Cell membrane. Thanks, Anna. That's correct. So this one for B is the cell membrane. Then we've got the inside. Again, think of just a normal cell. What would you have in the inside of a normal cell? It's just the jelly that we have inside, which is cytoplasm. Thanks, Jeanette. Cytoplasm. So again, this is one of those questions where they're trying to throw you off, because this is just a standard cell question. They've just drawn it in a really weird way. But if you just realize that it's a normal cell, just specialized, so it's changed its shape, then it's hopefully a bit more straightforward. So we've labeled parts A and B. What is the name given to the junction? I'm hoping everyone knows that now because I've mentioned it. Synapse, 1 mark. Good. In what form is this information passed across the junction? Does anyone remember from the last question that we did? Electrical impulses, not quite. Electrical impulses is after it's passed across. After it's passed across, it's converted into an electrical impulse. What form is it while it's passing across? Chemical, yes, Angie, chemical. So remember, it diffuses as a neurotransmitter chemical. That's how it moves across the gap. So you can just get away with saying chemical as the answer. So let me re-explain. You've got the synapse. It goes from one neuron to another neuron through a gap. When it goes through the gap, it starts off as an electrical impulse. So this is during the neuron. It's an electrical impulse. Through the gap, it diffuses as a chemical. And then once it gets to the next stage, it goes back to an electrical impulse. So this particular question was asking across the gap, across the junction. Hope that makes sense. Let me know if you want me to re-explain anything, please. Let's move on. Okay, 4-marker question. Might look scary when you see all of these lines, people get scared. So, diagram 2 shows a bee flying through towards a man's eye in the blink reflex. So note the word reflex, it's talking about a reflex response, not a voluntary response. Light from the bee reaches the light sensitive cell in the eye. So that's going to be the receptor part. The muscles in the eyelid shut and the man's eyes before the bee hits the eyes. Makes more sense now. Thank you. That's what we're trying to do here. So describe the pathway taken by the nerve impulse in the blink reflex. It's asking about this pathway here. This one. So let me remind you, you've got your stimulus. Your stimulus is what you sense. Your receptor, that's the thing that senses the stimulus. So that's the cells in your body that senses it. Then you've got sensory neuron. That's just where the electrical impulses are traveling through. Then it can either go to the brain or through a relay neuron. Then it goes to the motor neuron, then the effector. The effector can either be a muscle or a gland. Let's put an M and a G there. And then there's a response. So let's try and summarize for 4 marks what's happening here. Describe the pathway. So we're going to basically talk about those things. It's just asking about the blink reflex. So we don't need to really talk about stimulus. We know the stimulus is the light, but the thing that's sensing the light, what would we say? What part of the body is sensing the light? Where in the body do we sense light from? Yep, exactly. The retina in the eyes, because the retina has light sensitive cells. So what happens? The light receptors sense the light. So basically it senses the light coming off the, a bee, isn't it? Yeah, the light coming off a bee. And then that message goes through the next stage. So remember, it goes R, then we've got our sensory neuron. So we say it creates an electrical impulse. In the sensory neuron. Then from there, the message needs to go through to the CNS. So what part of the CNS are we talking about? Are we talking about the brain, or are we talking about the relay neuron here? Because this is a reflex response. What do you guys think? The brain or the relay neuron? In a reflex reaction. Relay, exactly. So then you say that the electrical impulse passes through the relay neuron. And then from there, it goes to the motor. Well done for everyone who said relay. And then from there, it's going to go to the effector. So remember what I said about effector. Effector can either be a muscle or a gland. So in this case, we're going to talk about the muscle in the eyelid. That's what causes the eye to close, so the bee doesn't get into the eye. It's just a natural reflex that we have. So the motor neuron causes the muscle to contract. And there we have it. 4 marks for that question. I hope that simplified it. Does the sensory neuron always create an electrical impulse? Yes, it does. It always converts, so the light receptor converts the light into an electrical impulse and always sends it down the sensory neuron. Throughout any neuron is always an electrical impulse that passes through it to send a message. Right, anyone have any questions on this one? Anything you guys want me to explain? Let me know if there is. Let's see what's next. Okay, so this question's all about synapse. So this is what I've been talking about. We've got a diagram of a synapse here. Figure 3 shows how a nerve impulse passing along a relay neuron causes an impulse to be sent along another type of neuron, neuron X. Okay, so we've got a relay neuron. So try and remember the order of things. What would be next after the relay neuron? What would this neuron X be? That's fine, Anna. Hope this video helps. Sensory, no, not sensory. Let me give you guys a clue. Let's look at the letters. So, what was it? It was a relay neuron, wasn't it? So what comes after relay neuron? Motor neuron. Yes, Daniela. Well done. It's a motor neuron. Remember, the order is sensory, relay, motor. That's for a reflex response. If it's a voluntary response, it'll be sensory, brain, motor. Well done, everyone who got motor. All right, describe how information passes from relay neuron to neuron X. Use figure 3 to help you. So this is literally an example of the same question that we did earlier. So it's the same 3 marks. So you can see like these questions repeat. So, and there's only a limited amount of things they can ask you in this topic. So do people remember what the 3 points were? What were the 3 things we need to talk about? So how does it pass across from the relay to the other neuron? What did we say? We've got clues here as well. Any keywords you guys can think of? Okay, so we got diffusion through gap being a chemical. Yes, good. Anyone remember the name of that chemical? Daniela, yeah, good. Neurotransmitter diffuses across the synapse. Good, good. People are remembering. So we've got the neurotransmitter chemical. That's the first thing to talk about. We'll say it's released. Then, did we mention it? Yeah, Angie mentioned it. So there's diffusion through the gap. So the chemical diffuses. And finally, what do you guys think the last mark's for? 3rd mark. It's once it's reached here. It's there. It's in the diagram. Good, Angie. Electrical impulse is created in the next neuron. Well done, guys. This question is a QA, yeah. So they said attaches to a neuron, triggers a new nerve impulse. Yep, that's fine as well. You can get that. You can get marks for saying that as well. Any questions about this one? So this question actually helps understand synapse. It's got a good diagram here. So like I said, electrical impulse comes in, neurotransmitter chemicals come out, diffuse across the gap, and then that causes an electrical impulse in the next neuron. Right, moving on. Okay, so this is a bit of a different question. I'd say it's a bit more, it's more thinking outside the box here rather than just regurgitating knowledge. So scientists investigate the effect of two toxins on the way in which information passes across synapses. So we've got two toxins here, Cura and this. Okay, these words don't matter. These aren't words you need to know. Okay, so don't worry about these. You're going to get these in your exams. You're going to get new words. It's going to throw people off. Don't worry about those words. This isn't something that you need to learn. It's something that's given to you and they expect you to use the data to try and work it out with your knowledge of what you need to know. So the important thing is what's in these boxes here. So the first one decreases the effect of chemical on neuron X. The other one increases the amount of chemical made in the relay neuron. Okay, so what chemical are they talking about? Hopefully now we know. It's the neurotransmitter chemical. The chemical that's diffusing across. So, describe the effect of each of these toxins on the response made by muscles. So you might be thinking, what's this got to do with muscles? When they talk about toxins, it sounds confusing, but remember the root. So it's going sensory, relay, motor. Then it's going to our effector. Our effector, they haven't told us what the effector is here, but in this question, it's told us it's about muscles. Okay, so the effector that we're talking about here is our muscles. So you have to basically talk about what this decrease in a chemical or increase in a chemical does to the muscle. So what do muscles do? When they react, what do muscles do? Does anyone know? Yes, Jeanette. Exactly. Well done, guys. So Jeanette said there's less chemical, so there's less impulse carried, therefore less of a response like muscle contraction. That is perfect for the mark. There's 2 marks, so you get 1 mark for each one that you talk about. So what you would say is, first of all, there's a decrease in chemical, the neurotransmitter chemical, meaning less muscle contraction. Is this triple? No. This is double and it's AQA. So the opposite, increase in the amount of chemical, you literally just write the opposite. So you just say there's an increase in chemical meaning more muscle contraction. Well, yeah, you do triple, but everything on double is also in triple. So this is relevant to everyone, basically. It's relevant to everyone doing GCSE Biology, even combined. So everyone who does it needs to know this. So yeah, that's it, guys. So basically, it looks like a hard question. People are going to get thrown off by these names because they've never learnt it before. But like I said, just ignore those names, look at the information, and try and use your own knowledge to answer them. Is there anything you guys want me to re-explain in this question? Okay, so let's move on to the next one. Okay, this question is about the nervous system. Describe the function of receptors in the skin. What do you guys think? 2 marks here. 1 mark's easier to get than the other. What's the function of a receptor? But remember, it's 2 marks, which mean you have 2 points. So yep, we've got they detect stimuli. Someone wrote that. So remember, a stimulus or a stimuli is a change in the environment. Then that's 1 mark. Second mark is a nerve impulse the same as an electrical impulse? Yes, Daisy, it is. They're both the same thing. Yeah, Jeanette, good. It creates an electrical impulse, which goes basically to the next stage, which is a sensory neuron. So detects stimuli, first mark. Second mark, creates electrical impulse. Well done, guys. Right, next question. A response is caused when information in the nervous system reaches an effector. So we're talking about effectors here. There are 2 types of effectors. What are the 2 types of effectors? What do they each do? 4 marks. You can get away with writing a few words here, and you can get all 4 marks. So first of all, what are the 2 different types of effectors? We mentioned this a few minutes ago. Muscle and gland, yes. Good, well done, guys. Muscle, gland. So that answers that. What are the responses of each? Muscle contracts, good. What exam board is this? This is AQA, guys. Muscle contracts. What does a gland do then? So Daniela, yep, secretes hormones. Well done. Good. Some effectors help to control body temperature. Give 1 reason why it's important to control body temperature. Right, so this question is technically not the nervous system. It's to do more with homeostasis, but does anyone know what can happen if you can't control body temperature? Good, it's all to do with enzymes. It's going to cause enzymes to denature. If the body temperature gets too high, then enzymes are going to denature. This is combined and triple and higher as well. Basically everyone needs to know this. So yeah, you'll say enzymes denature. You don't say cells denature. It's all about enzymes. So you get the marks for saying enzymes denature. Good. Any questions on this one, guys? We've got one more question to do after this. Right, let's move on. So, this question is about the nervous system. Describe the difference between the function of a receptor, function of the effector. So I'm hoping you guys have picked this up during the live. Give one example of a receptor, one example of an effector. So 4 marks. So I'll tell you what the 4 marks are for. Function of a receptor, 1 mark. Function of effector, 2 marks. One example of each, 3 and 4 marks. So what do we think, guys? Function of a receptor, we've written this already. Receptor detects a change in the environment. Yep. This is this A level? No, it's GCSE. So receptor detects stimuli, or you can say change in environment, that's fine. An example of a receptor. Retina, yeah, you can get away with saying retina. So examples you can have, or think of all the senses, things that we can sense. We've got light receptors in the eye, we've got sound receptors in the ear, we've got pressure and temperature receptors in the skin, chemical receptors in the nose and tongue, basically. So yeah, most people have said retina in the eyes. So yeah, let's say light receptors. In the retina. And then we've got an effector. So what do effectors do? What would we say for a mark there? Effectors, I think people have said they provide a response. Good, well done. So effectors provide a response. And they can basically be one of 2 things. Yep, respond to stimulus, that's fine. Muscle or gland. Muscle contract, secrete. Yep, good. Well done, guys. So well done, Anna. So you would say they provide a response. And they can either be a muscle. So an example would be a muscle or a gland. Good, right, next one. So we've done this question already. What is a synapse for 2 marks? Does anyone remember? A gap in the neuron, yep, you can say a gap in the neuron. You can say a junction between the neuron. What time do you start the session? Sessions at 8. We got 3 sessions. We got sessions on Mondays, Tuesdays, and Sundays. Mondays are biology, Tuesdays are chemistry, and Sundays are physics. What is a synapse? So let's write down junction. Between neurons. Sounds like it should be 1 mark, but that's actually for 2 marks. So you get 1 mark for saying junction, and the second mark is for saying between neurons. What year is this paper? I think it might be, off the top of my head, I don't remember. It might be 2018. I need to double check that. I'll try and find out for you. But the paper is higher. This paper's higher, but most of this stuff you do need to know for both higher and foundation. Describe how information passes across a synapse. final question. So we've done this twice already, this question. So it releases chemicals called neurotransmitters which diffuse across. Good. So first thing to do is to mention neurotransmitters. So neurotransmitters are released. And second mark is to say they diffuse across the gap. So the other ones that we did, they were 3 marks. This one's only 2 marks. Diffuse across. And for that one, to carry on, diffuse across the gap and stimulate an impulse. In the next neuron. Well done, guys.